the primary metal fabricator here at the shop, and today Johnny's working on a 1960 Giulietta Sprint Veloce. This particular car had extensive rust issues that we are going through very slowly. Because of the level of rust that's in this car, a lot of the infrastructure of it has been compromised. So before you could do some of the pretty work on the outside, the interior stuff had to be more stable than it is. On the Giulietta, some of the most difficult things to keep in perspective is how tight some of the lines are. Well, for example, where the doors meet the quarter panels and where the hood and the trunk meet, they're all hand formed to that particular car, so no two doors, no two hoods, no two trunks are the same. So oftentimes we'll get a car in that those are mismatched parts that are on there and they don't fit, and we have to go back and make them fit. Johnny's going to talk about some of the complications in recreating some of these parts.
So as Darren mentioned before, no two of these airboxes are the same. So we have to custom fab each one as it comes in. And this isn't the first one we do. In fact, we've done multiple airboxes before in either the Sprints or the Spiders. And so what we have to do is we have to cut out the headlight bucket in order to gain access to even remove the rusted out old box. It was so rusted that I had to figure out the angles that I had to fabricate this box in so that it would fit tightly around the front of the car. So as you can see here, I sectioned the headlight bucket out, I removed it, I removed the old box, and I had to build it piece by piece. As you can see here is one piece, another piece, the bottom piece, and then the bottom inner piece. And now that I have it tacked back up into place, now I can see how well this fits, and I can see how well these angles are going to fit up against this lip. So we will rebuild all this around the new airbox. But before we do that, we had to make sure that the airbox was actually going to fit the contours of this car. Okay, so now this hood doesn't belong to this car, and these hoods were built to fit the car because each car was hand built, just like the airbox. So since this hood wasn't fitting, what was going on is this body line was absent. There was no body line, or gap, I mean, through here. So what we had to do is we had to section the hood along the edge so that it would give it strength for when we welded it back up. And that gave us enough gap to move this flange in towards the center of the hood, and we tack welded this back up slowly, and then we welded it back up in 1/2-inch increments to make sure that it wouldn't warp the metal of the hood and it got too hot. Then we dressed the welds, and now we have this perfect gap back in the hood against the fender.
Okay, this is really for you guys who own the Giuliettas. You may or may not already know this stuff, but if you're in the market for Giulietta and you're really just doing your learning curve right now, there's some things you need to know. Obviously, a project car is always going to be cheaper. A project car that's disassembled should put warning flags up for you. Yeah, you can automatically check right then and there if you have a copy of the FUSI whether the motor is correct to the chassis and all that kind of stuff. But the thing you really need to look out for is the doors, hoods, and trunks. The doors are stamped and they should match the chassis. Okay, the reason is because there's no adjustability in them. So the gaps have to be spot on, because to correct that is really expensive and a very long endeavor to make right. In this case, we have a trunk lid on this 60 Sprint Veloce that is a Sprint deck lid. For those of you who really know your stuff, you can see that it doesn't have that flat oval area right here. But the thing of it is this deck lid doesn't quite fit this car, and we are in the process of making that right. But what I have is just 3 other deck lids right here with me. This is what I'm saying. If you're looking to buy a parts car and all of it's technically there, make sure they actually come close to lining up when you put them on the car before you put the money down. Because here's the thing, to fix trunk lids, doors, and hoods to fit the chassis, that is labor intensive. And I mean seriously labor intensive, okay? So this deck lid is close, but it's not a winner. Okay? We're gonna make this one right because it's the closest one we have. But here's another one that we have from an inventory. Now this isn't a Sprint Veloce deck lid, but it is a deck lid for a Sprint. Not even close. There's a gigantic over an inch gap up here in the corner, because this is a different era deck lid than for the car. Nothing else is right about it. The contour coming down here is completely poor, and it doesn't even fit on the side at all. Okay, so this would have been really not a fair option. It would cost way too much money to get this one straight. Then we have another early Sprint Veloce trunk lid. It's close-ish. It's actually better than most of the ones we have around here. So, you know, this wouldn't be a bad option as well. Okay? Not a bad option. Actually, and then we have another Sprint Normale. This one's really bad. Right here you have about a 3/4 of an inch drop. Over here, tremendous amount of drop. I'll show you so you can see it better. Tremendous drop right here. The line up on the bottom isn't even close. So the bottom line is, if it's in boxes and the doors, hood, and trunk are on, before you lay the money down, go see how close they are to fitting. Because if they don't fit, or they're not even close, or if the doors don't have the chassis number stamped on them, that should reflect in the price dramatically.
This car, so what we have to do is we have to match the contours of this coach-built deck lid to the contours of this coach-built car. Now, here you will see the relief cuts that we had to make in the deck lid to shape this deck lid to make it fit this car. Now what we did here is, you can see all these welds down here. We plug welded the webbing from the skin of the deck lid because the webbing was just too far from the skin of the deck lid, and what that made it do is it didn't make it very rigid, so it had a lot of flex in it. So now that we have this welded to the skin of the deck lid, now it's nice and solid and rigid. So what we had to do is make all these relief cuts, and we had to stretch this deck lid out to fit the contours of this car. So what we had to do is get this deck lid on blocks, and we marked down where exactly it was that we had to stretch this back out. So with some pressure, some even pressure all the way along, pushing the corners of the deck lid out and this down flat so it would fit the contour of the car. Then we would mock the deck lid back up to the car and make sure that it fit. As you can see here, it's sunken down a little bit. The same thing with this corner, so we'll just keep working it, just the way that I demonstrated, to make sure that everything along the edges fits perfectly. Okay, so this is a driver's side airbox that we're finishing up here. We got the majority of the shape done. We have the ducting for the engine bay fabricated and welded up into place. As you can see here, I've got the grill in there, and I fabricated this frame around the grill to clean it up really nicely. As you can see, I am doing the same for the ducting for the carburetors, for the airbox that's going to go straight into there. And after that's done, we'll just mount it in the car, mock it up, make sure it fits nicely, screw it into place, and weld her up. The airbox. You can see how complicated these shapes are. We have the fresh air intake for the engine bay and the air intake for the airbox. Now I'm just going to mount it into place. That's approximately where it's going to go. So I'll center it up. I'll screw everything together so it fits up nice and tight up around the grill area and up against the firewall, and then we'll just weld it into place.